I'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. We have a quorum with 5 members present. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Ms. Nolan. Our agenda item is consideration, discussion, and possible action related to management oversight workshop for the CSISD Transportation Department. As a part of local policy BAA in our management oversight process, each semester kind of take a detailed look into one of our 6 operations department. This time up is our transportation. I will turn things over momentarily to Mr. Hector Silva, our Director of Transportation. We were scheduled for human resources in the spring, but for obvious reasons that did not occur. So this next spring on the calendar is oversight meeting for facilities, and we'll do a second one and circle back and grab our human resources department in the spring. But to stay on track, today we have the privilege of Mr. Silva giving us a detailed look into our transportation department. It's all yours, Mr. Silva. Thank you for being here.
Well, it's a pleasure, Mr. Martindale. Thank you for the introduction. It's nerve-wracking, but it is a pleasure to be before you. We try to think of ourselves as behind-the-scenes folks, and so we're more comfortable behind the scenes and not in the limelight. But thank you very much for having us. We hope to give you some good information, and of course, if you have any questions along the way, let us know. So, Mr. Martindale already went through why we do what we're doing right now, and that has to do with the Center for Reform of School Systems, or short CRSS. And what do we do there? Well, we're trying to present the policies and the processes used by a school board to ensure the integrity, the performance of the district's major business and operations systems. Of course, Mr. Martindale already mentioned some of the aspects of what you would hear. We are one of those, and we're going to go dive in. I'm not going to go over the definition again, but basically, what we're trying to show you is that students are safe, employees are safe, the district's assets are secure, and that the laws and the policies are followed. Are we fair? We're going to go through that, and are major business systems effective and efficient? The part of the things that we're going to talk about during the management oversight is the description of the program, what we do, the system's integrity, the performance metrics, and the policy recommendations, if any. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you briefly about the purpose of this presentation, the policies that govern our entity, our vocation, the organization of the department, the number, the types of employees, the budget, unit cost, and also some of the trends, the number of buses, that's a big deal for us, the age of the buses, and also a replacement schedule. We're also going to share with you the number of children transported daily by types and the average travel time and distance. We like to highlight that we're all about those 3 big, bold letters right there, in that order, especially the safety part. So we're all about being safe, being courteous, and also being efficient wherever we can. These are some of the policies that govern our department. I'm not going to read them to you, but basically it has to do with bonds related to transportation, the management of the department, district vehicles, transportation safety, purchasing, employment requirements, the medical aspect of what we have to deal with, drug testing, homeless, which, you know, we're not really calling it homeless anymore, right? It's McKinney-Vento. And also disruption of services, bus advertising, and finally, special needs. So, in a nutshell, this is who we are. We have approximately 130 employees. The majority of those are 25-hour guarantee employees, so part-time. That in itself has its own challenges, as you can imagine. Myself, Hector Silva, I'm the director. I've been the director since 2008. I came as soon as I could. I came from West Texas. That's quite a different. It took me a few months. Caleb, my assistant director, that I have skipped over can vouch for the fact that it took me a couple of months to acclimate to the weather here. And now when I go back to El Paso, I shrivel up in a few days, literally. So my assistant director, like I said, Caleb Williams, my right hand and sometimes my left hand and sometimes both hands. Thank you very much for being here, Caleb. My shop foreman would be Matt Beal, and he is in charge of fleet operations. We have 4 mechanics that work under him, also a shop helper that helps out with anything from fixing seats to prepping buses for field trips. And we also have 1 parts clerk. Those are all full-time positions. The rest of the staff, Ginger Kubacek is my secretary. She's the one that keeps me straight and tells me what to do most times. I also have a full-time dispatcher, Deborah Johnson, a part-time dispatcher, Debbie Brinkman, a full-time routing specialist, Chuck Longwell, and one part-time routing specialist, Tyler Hampton. In all, we have 84 school bus drivers that come in every day. Most of those are 25 plus, like I said, employees, so we guarantee them 25 hours a week. That's broken down by who is there permanently, and by permanently we mean they're there AM and PM. They're bringing the kids in from home, taking them to school, and at the end of the day, from school to home. And I have 67 permanent employees that come in both shifts during the day. I have 17 that are temporary, and by temporary we mean folks that come in on different days or sometimes different schedules. I have some Aggies that work for me and can only do certain schedules. And then we have moms, single moms, and we have part-time employees that work for us. Believe it or not, the gamut ranges from vice presidents of a local bank to moms that want to drive for us. So yes, we do have 1 banker that works for us on a regular basis, believe it or not. And he says he does that, by the way, to stay sane. Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you which bank, but maybe.
Yeah, we're not going to go into that. We also have 32 school bus monitors, and those are also 25 plus hour employees. We only have 1 staff member that does not possess a CDL by design. Why do we say that? Because sometimes the need is so great that we have everyone, and by everyone I mean except that 1 employee, on a school bus. And so if that employee had a CDL, a commercial driver's license, we would probably ask them to drive also, but then we would leave the building by itself. We have not run into that, by the way, in a long time. So, but by design, we do have that 1 person, and that would be Ginger, by the way.
And I have to compliment Caleb and Hector, because when they say everyone, they really mean everyone. I could always tell as principal on Fridays when things may be tight, or there were, maybe both high schools had activities out of town and those types of things, because our last bus that would come through to pick up kids to take them on a route would be none other than Mr. Silva. So it's all hands on deck, absolutely, on some days.
And it's a great recruit topic when you tell folks, oh yeah, the director and the assistant director, we drive when we have to. So we do. Those are some of the numbers that you can see before you for the last 3 years as far as budget. As you can see, we are slowly incrementing the budget as the years progress. Obviously, things are getting more expensive. So if I could to show you the last column, that was last year. That's a short year. So some of the numbers there are a little bit different than previous years, and that's the reason for that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on there. We can always come back to it. And I do have some more numbers further in the presentation. So pay schedules. Big topic in Texas and in the nation on what we pay our bus drivers. Why? Because there's a shortage of bus drivers throughout the nation. It used to be that TEA allowed that to be a critical job classification. I'm probably not using the right words, that as soon as you retired from a school district, you could be rehired the very next day as a school bus driver. That is not the case anymore, by the way. But it is an ongoing challenge to recruit and to retain bus drivers. Again, we are very fortunate here in College Station. We have maintained quite a full staff throughout the years. Even in the pandemic, and I'll go into it a little bit further, we have done very well. And by the way, typically in a good economy, you have a hard time getting people to drive a school bus. In a bad economy, such as the one we're in, we have people sometimes knocking on the door and say, hey, I really want to become a bus driver. It's like, really? Where were you a few years ago when I needed you? But yeah, that's how it goes. So bus driver pay has had a positive impact on recruitment and retention. We were previously at $16 an hour. This year, with the help of you and Miss Amy, we have raised the rate to $16.50 an hour. We're still a little bit below the competition, but I can honestly say that we have not lost one person because they've gone to another district because of pay. So we're very proud of that. Bus aides, they start at $10.52 an hour. We also annualize our base pay for drivers. We did that 2 years ago, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Caleb, 2.5 years. And what we would see in the past is we would see a lot of departures around the holidays and obviously during the summer. So people would go out, get other jobs, or have time to go look for other jobs, and then they wouldn't come back after that. The annualized pay has really helped. We have had a positive impact because people are not leaving us because they have a check. In the past, after Christmas, they wouldn't get a check at all. During the summer, if they didn't work for us during the summer, they didn't get a check. And now they do get a check. So the check is evened out, spaced out throughout the year, and that helps quite a bit. Our bus inventory and current route information. As you can see, we have 118 buses total, and I'll go into more detail in a few minutes. Regular ed, we have about 81 buses, special needs, 34, and we have transit. Those are what we call the snub nose. Those are called transits, and we have 3 of those. Daily routes, we have 45 regular ed routes, 20 special needs routes currently. McKinney-Vento, what used to be called homeless, we have 59 students right now. Dedicated routes, we have 0. So what we're doing is we're integrating those kids in existing routes. We have 5 routes that help us do that, and we distribute those 59 kids among those 5 routes. Dual language, we have 17 routes of dual language. That program is growing every year. And we have 1 route with a paid rider in it, or excuse me, 5 students that are paid riders. And I'll go into a little bit more detail what that means or what that is in a minute. The balance. So reserve or field trip buses, we have 52 buses that helps us do that. All ranges of years, and we'll go into that a little bit later also. Field trips, we do about 10 buses a day on average, and we have 1 to 4 buses in the shop being fixed at any given time. So this is the matrix for school bus transportation CSISD. It's a lot of numbers, but all I see is buses there. And the year of the bus that was purchased, the number of the bus, as you can see at the very top, total for each year, what kind of bus it is it a B or a C or a D, whether it's regular or special. And this really helps me also to look at the sheet and tell my percentages. So how much percentage do I have of one bus or a total of buses? And I'll give you a little breakdown of what that means in a minute also. So before 2011, we were doing replacement. We were on a replacement cycle that netted about 8% of the fleet every year. That equated to about 6 to 7 buses every year or every other year, depending on whether the funds were available. Also, some of you are also familiar with some of the bonds that we passed 2011, 2015, 2017, and each of those netted us quite a few buses, which was awesome. It really, really, really helped. But further on, you're going to see why that may be a little bit of a negative. So in all, right now, we sit at 26.3% of the fleet is 10 years or older. That is unheard of across the state, by the way. So 73.7% of the fleet is less than 10 years old. Again, we don't hear that, we don't see that anywhere, and we are very much in tune with the whole state, by the way. Now, in 21-22, we're going to have 53.4% of the fleet will be 10 years or older.
Hector, let me go back to the previous two bullets, the 73.7 and 26.3. And when you say you don't hear of that, are those good numbers or bad numbers?
Yes, I meant it to be a positive.
Okay.
That is unheard of. Districts do not have that.
All right.
Ooh, sorry about that.
The former
didn't mean
CFO
to-
was getting nervous. Thank you.
I didn't mean to. Thank you for clarification, Mr. Martindale. So yes, most districts are 50% or more have 10-year or older buses. So we sit very well. Going back to the 21-22, at that point, if we purchase nothing, we'll be at 53% will be 10 years or older. 22-23 will be at 55%, which is still pretty good average, I would say, across the state. The key is because we purchased so many buses on 2011, 2015, 2017, by 23-24, if we do nothing, we're going to be at 80% of our fleet is going to be 10 years or older. So it's still a few years away. Now, buses, keep in mind, when you order a bus, they're not off the shelf. Every state has different specifications for school buses. So buses are built specifically for the state that you're in. Much more also what district you're in. So we require certain equipment, so they're not off the shelf. They make them. Now, usually it doesn't take 6 months, but it can take up to 6 months. So if we say, oh, we need 10 buses by next month, it's more than likely not going to happen, not by the manufacturer's timeline. All right, transitioning over to students. So travel time. The goal for the maximum average travel time, distance and child, is 1 hour. Based on the logistical miles that we transport, we cover 96 square miles in this district. So all that challenges to about an hour is a good time to ride. Now, for most parents, that seems a little high. But most parents think of, okay, I live 20 minutes from the school. Why is it taking an hour? Because this is public transportation, and it's obvious, but it's not sometimes. So we're carrying not one child, we're carrying up to 71 children on a bus. And so we've got to make those stops. The average for all runs in our district is 24 minutes. So that is very good. If you go to Houston, Austin, obviously that drive time is going to be a lot greater. But because we're a district that, it doesn't have a lot of square mileage, doesn't have a lot of traffic jams like some of these other cities, we sit very well. The distances, right now, the maximum distance that we travel is 30 miles one way. On average, it's about 20 miles one way. Okay, so students and miles. The average daily ridership for regular, you can see in 2019, it was 3,883 regular kids being transported. If I may take you over to the next, right now, year to date, and of course, we all know what year we're we sit in. Right now, we sit at 1,925, almost half. But it's growing. We're seeing an increase in ridership as the year progresses. Special needs, last year we transported 385. This year we're at 240. Kate, that would be the career and technology. We had 11 kids that we were transporting last year. This year we have 12. And those are your totals for, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, where are those K students transferred to and from?
Last year, there was a lot of career and technology dealing with the health industry, also in special needs. This includes special needs. So anything related to special needs where their IEP calls for job training, that's also included in there. This year, we are transporting kids to, I want to say it's mechanics in Bryan. I forget the name of the program, but that's what it is. Yes, ma'am. Annual total miles for route mileage. You can see that in 17-18 we had a little bit over 800,000. 18-19 we had a bump, 886,593. And then last year, again, short year, so those miles went down, 607,788. Field trips. So we do quite a bit of field trips, but pretty average for our size of district. 1,450 total individual field trips a year.
So Hector,
Yes, sir.
we're not running field trips this year, correct?
We're running some field trips, sir. A lot of them, it's coaches that are driving.
Okay.
And then some support staff on Fridays. We are doing some of that also.
So field trip, but that's like extracurriculars.
Yes.
You're including in there. Okay, I got you. Hey, and I don't mean to go backwards, but I'm going to ask you, go back one slide for me, if you will. Quick question. Says distance maximum 30 miles. That's to the farthest pickup point on the route, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about some system integrities. So the major transportation vendors, as you can expect, we deal with dealerships. International is a big one. Most of our fleet is international. We have no Bluebirds, if you're familiar with the industry. We do have some Thomases. Policy CNB has to do with purchasing of buses, servicing of buses. All leases and purchases of school buses greater than 50,000 must be subject to competitive bidding, and we do that. We stick to that. Competitive bids, requests for sealed proposals, and also state purchasing cooperatives. We take advantage of all those three. Parts, we use the state purchasing cooperative also through the local vendors.
So Hector, you're consistent, you attempt to be most of the time with the type of bus you purchase, correct? Because it helps you with efficiency in your parts inventory.
Yes, sir. Thank you for asking that question. That is absolutely correct. What happens if you have a multiple of or a multitude of buses that you have to deal with, different brands, is you're having to storage a lot of parts and dealing with multiple vendors. And so we find that it's actually cheaper to deal with a particular vendor. They still have to go through every hurdle of bids and quotes and all that. But yes, standardization is more efficient for us. All right, the hiring and training process. Whew, recruiting. So we use the newspaper, job boards, Craigslist, buses at the high school. You may have seen them. That actually has a lot of return on investment. I think we paid $700 for those signs. And that's the one thing that brings people in the door. Say, hey, I saw the sign. Come on in. It does take right now, because of the pandemic and everything that we're dealing with, 3 to 4 months to fully process a person that wants to become a bus driver. It used to be 60 days, and now it's doubled to 4. Why? Not because it's taken us more time to train, but it's taken us a lot more time to get people through the process with Department of Public Safety. We do have one outlet, TEEX does have a third-party tester that we partner with. That comes with a fee, though. When we go to DPS, it's pretty much for free. I mean, we still pay for the license. If we go through TEEX, there's a fee to get somebody through a test. But it does get somebody in a lot faster if we needed them desperately.
Does that include someone with previous experience that already has the TDL? And
That's a very good question. No, so if they have a commercial driver's license with a B, a Class B, with a P,
Yeah.
passenger, and an S, school bus, they can start right away. Yeah. It's somebody, well, and that's a very good question, because if somebody comes in from the trucking industry, they still would take 3 to 4 months because they don't have the P, the passenger, and the S endorsement. They have to start all over. Good
But I
question.
have another question while we're on that, about the fingerprinting, because that was in the news that's been a local issue with hiring. Is that the case for you?
We have not had any issues with that. Now, we haven't done a lot of hiring this year, per se. So I know at the beginning of the year, Ms. McAdams, we did have a little bit of a snafu, but nothing that would prevent us from processing our employees.
Nothing we've heard at the district level?
No, there was early on, but I think the system's caught up on itself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So you mentioned the minimum qualifications. One of them was the fingerprints, and yes, our folks have to be fingerprinted. They also have to go through the training for the P and the S endorsement. Typically, our training goes about 40 hours. Between 35 and 40 hours, we can take somebody that has never been on a bus and get them to pass a test. It's the lag time at DPS that's taking the longest. They also have to pass a DOT physical, which, believe it or not, is very stringent. If the doctor says, and they ask you on a questionnaire, do you have trouble sleeping? Well, that's a red flag. Now you have to go through a sleep study. And if you're not hired, you have to go through a sleep study, and you have to pay for that if you don't have insurance. So we have run into some instances where the DOT physical has preventing somebody from driving a school bus. Lots of requirements there. Your blood pressure has to be a certain level, obviously. And trust me, I have to go through those. It's not easy when you can take it at home and you can take it with your regular doctor and it's fine. And then you go to test for this and it's way up there. And they have to sit you down for about 30 minutes and just deep breathe. Just breathe. We also have to pass pre and random drug screenings that DOT mandates. And I'll talk a little bit about the clearinghouse in a bit. It has to do with the drug screening. Lastly, we have to meet the DPS point system criteria. What is that? Well, talked about the drugs earlier, the drug screenings. Federal Motor Carrier now has a centralized clearinghouse that we have to report to anytime there's a positive drug screening. In the past, everything was very localized, so that a person driving a school bus tested positive for drugs, and then they'd go to the next school district, and it wouldn't show up. So now the Federal Motor Carrier has this clearinghouse, so everything has to be reported to them, so that if we're going to hire somebody that has a CDL, then we can run that check and make sure that somebody has not tested positive for drugs, illegal drugs, I should say. The school bus driver record evaluation penalty point system, that's a mouthful. Basically, if you have too many points assessed by offenses, then you can't drive a school bus. What kind of offenses are we talking about? The examples there, improper equipment. You don't have a stop on a school bus, or clearance lights not working. If they pull you over and give you a ticket, that's 1 point on your system. Accidents are 2 points. Traffic, such as speeding, that's 3 points. And the traffic could run the gamut. Anything that can stop you not just on your bus, by the way. This also includes your private vehicle. So if you get stopped for any of these things in your private vehicle, that goes against your license to drive a school bus. The last one there is your criminal driving incidents. So somebody gets injured, killed, you were intoxicated in your private vehicle or otherwise, you get 10 points, you cannot drive a school bus. Some of those points carry through 10 years. So let's say somebody gets caught driving while the influence. You cannot drive a school bus for 10 years.
On the improper equipment, you mentioned a taillight or something of that nature. It's because they're supposed to do an inspection of the vehicle before they ever leave the lot, correct?
That is correct, and that's part of our protocols. Everybody has to do a pre-trip inspection every time they get on a bus, and that's documented. The catch here is that if you're not doing a pre-trip inspection on your own vehicle and you get stopped and you get cited for missing a light, then that goes also. So a lot of us in this industry are very good about pre-tripping our own vehicles, and the wives look at us like, what are you doing? All right, so CDL testing, anatomy of a school bus. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but that's some of the things that we are teaching folks to identify. It can include clearance lights, the whole gamut. Here's the catch on these. You've got to talk to your DPS officer for each and every part that they want to hear about. So if you have no experience under the hood, that's why it takes about 40 hours to learn the spiel of what does an alternator do? What is it made out of? What drives the alternator? What can go wrong with the alternator? And so forth and so on. So lots of arrows, lots of stuff you got to talk to. If you say the wrong word or if you don't do certain processes, I'll give you an example. If you're doing your brake test with a DPS officer, and you've passed all your items, you've checked all your items on the bus and you've passed. If you miss the brake system check or test, it's an automatic fail. And so we have a great track record here. In 2016, when this came into play, we struggled a little bit because we don't know the standards. What's really ironic is the new standards came out, and yeah, they put out a book telling you the standards, but not very detailed. So folks would go take a test and then they'd fail, and DPS can't tell you why you failed. Okay? So it's like taking a test, but you don't know what you missed. So you got to go back home and do something, but you don't know exactly what. So it took us a little bit of time to get that. After a while, though, we have a very high successful rate. We have such a high successful rate that other districts are calling us. Can you come train us? I don't know. Miss Amy doesn't let me go very far. But we talk a lot. Yeah, we talk a lot on the phone.
How much training are you doing?
We have a very low turnover rate right now because the pandemic and the economy. So we're not doing a lot of training. We're doing some training right now with Class A. So that's a great question. So the district acquired 2 18-wheelers in the past 2 years to pull the band trailers. You may have seen them. And so that's all driven in-house. And so we are taking some of our folks that have a Class B and training them to get a Class A. So now we've added not just the Class B training, but we're also doing the Class A. Good question.
I'm sorry, I should have been a little more clear. So when you're hired, you get initial training on all of this. Is it each year there's more training, or just when new things change, or how does that work?
Very good question. Actually, we train for the test. You've heard that before, right? We train for the test, we get you past DPS, and then we bring you back in, and we can have up to 2 more weeks of training, video training, hands-on training, specifically to school bus, how to deal with the kids on a bus, how to deal with parents, how to deal with administrators, I mean, the whole gamut. And by deal, I don't mean that negatively. How to relate to, I should say, is probably a better word. So yeah, lots of training. Now, bus drivers get 20-hour certification training from the state, okay, initially. And so that's part of they can't drive a school bus unless they have those 20 hours. Regional service centers are the ones that provide those for us. After 3 years, you have to go back and do an 8-hour refresher. So lots and lots of training. And we do a lot of in-house also. Good question. So I'm not going to bore you with all these parts. Just kind of roll there. And the hiring and training process. So, other qualifications that we look for. Complete required bus driver safety training course, like we mentioned earlier, written and verbal instructions, communicate effectively. We help our drivers with that and our monitors, manage student behavior, operate a school bus. Which of those do you think is the most challenging? Anybody? Yeah, so that's the one that gives us the most challenge. It doesn't mean that we don't meet the challenge. It's just that's the one that gives us the most challenge, is meeting. Folks have a hard time that have never driven a bus getting behind the wheel, but after they get behind the wheel, it's like, I don't know if I can deal with those kids. Well, we have really good kids in College Station. I'm from the El Paso area originally. Kayla Williams is originally from the San Antonio area. When we always use that, by the way, during our interview process. If you want to have challenging kids, El Paso, San Antonio, Houston, those are challenging kids. Bryan College Station, specifically College Station, not so much. We have some very good kids here. A lot of our kids still say thank you. Believe it or not, that's not common in our industry. And a lot of our kids say, thank you for the ride and see you tomorrow. People that have driven in other cities are amazed when they come here and like, the kids say, thank you. Yeah, what's wrong with that? So training, the DPS driver training, we talked about that. We also do first aid training, CPR, CPI, crisis prevention intervention. Bus driver safety training, we talked about that, the 20-hour initial and then the 8-hour every 3 years. The August training, that's right before we start school. We bring him in and we update him on whatever we need to update him on, and also do some recurrent training as far as bullying, sexual harassment, bloodborne pathogens, everything that's required. We do have staff development during the year, only as needed. So supervision process. So all transportation employees supervised by yours truly and Caleb, my assistant director. If somebody messes up, we document it, we talk to them, we help them. One of my things when somebody makes a mistake is bring them in and not scold them, but say, what did you learn? And that is really helpful, because they're used to messing up and then getting scolded or written up. I don't like to do that unless if it is warranted. Obviously, we will document it, but I want to know, what are you going to change? And the only issue we have is when somebody says, well, I wouldn't do anything differently. Then we need to do some training. Also, if there's any minor infractions, we get that together and we watch it throughout the years, throughout the months, depending on how long the employee has been employed with us. Obviously, if there's a major infraction, we do offer up termination, and we work with HR on that very closely. Vehicle inspections. So a little bit more about the vehicle. We have a 10-point check when they come in the door. We also have a transmission 8-point check. The chassis has a 53-point check, and those are some of the items there: the axle, tie rod, springs, shocks, wheels, fuel, I mean, everything. We go through it extensively. When's the last time you've had service on your vehicle? Well, let me share with you what it cost us to do maintenance on them. Fluid service, that means oil, transmission if needed, water, that's a $500 hit, okay, on a bus. If we have to replace all tires, that's $1,800. Brake replacement, $650. And if we have to do any AC, air compressor repair, that's $500. And that's not labor included. That's just parts. Safety issues, seat belts. A few years ago, there was a big push in the news about requiring school buses to have seat belts, and that is the case. That is the law. We have a few that are fully outfitted with seat belt buses. Most of them are not seat belted. So there's the law, Texas Education Code 34.013. It's interesting, the Texas law says new buses have to have seat belts. Traffic law hasn't caught up with that, though. That's funny. So sometimes, and we don't advertise it, but sometimes people want to know, do I have to wear a seatbelt? Texas Education Code says yes. We do, and we do demand it. We do promote it. It's a good thing wherever we have seatbelts throughout. We do ask them to wear them. We do have 2 Head Start buses that have seatbelts throughout. That's it. Evacuations, in the past, it was required that school districts had to have every student in the district go through an evacuation drill of a school bus. That is no longer required. But we do go through with our staff to make sure that they know how to do that and that they practice it and that they discuss it with their children on the bus. By the way, evacuating a school bus, that's part of our interview process. And so we're very proud of that too. We try to be trailblazers, and that's one of the places where we do that. So after the initial verbal interview, we said, okay, are you ready? We're going to take you out to a bus, and you're going to evacuate a school bus. And they're like, oh, what does that mean? How many kids am I going to have to? No. Evacuate yourself. So if you can't put yourself in the driver's seat and walk down the stairs 3 times, okay, you can't work with us. Believe it or not, that is a thing. Sometimes we have folks that come through the door and can't do that. If you can't exit the back door, then again, you shouldn't be driving a school bus. If we have a mannequin in the back that weighs about 40 pounds, we ask them to pick it up and put it on the floor. We have another mannequin that weighs 60 pounds, and they have to drag it 30 feet. So that tells us this driver, this person can evacuate a school bus in case we need to. Accident reports. So all accidents are reported to TEA unless there's no passengers or pedestrians involved, injured. And if we have school bus advertising, we do have to report that to DPS. And we do have some buses that have advertising. I'll go over it a little bit in a minute. So local facts. DPS Snapshot. So every year, DPS wants us to do how many vehicles passed your red stop sign. The last time we did it, it was 97 instances. For such a small community, that's really high. Maybe one of the reasons is we have such a young community and we have such a diverse community. So we have people from all over the state and sometimes all over the world here. And sometimes they're not familiar with a yellow school bus, but that is high. We do have partnerships with College Station Police Department, and anytime we see an uptick on violations, we do communicate with them, and they're very helpful. They'll go out there and they'll wait at that stop and see what happens. Sometimes the outcome is not positive for the other drivers. So the national effects, just real quickly, you can see that it is an issue with school buses across the nation. We had 1,313 school bus fatalities related to a school bus. Some of that is the bus occupants. Others occupants outside the vehicles. We had some issues with pedestrians nationally, cyclists, and also non-occupants. Okay, so what happens if we do really, really well 30 days in a row? So what I like to do is we recognize our department, and we set them up, and we bring in some lunch, and we all celebrate our safety record. And so we do that every 30 days. Obviously, we have not done that this year because of the pandemic and all the restrictions with close contact and all. But we're still keeping record, though. And we also recognize our employees when they are safe. We nominate our employees, and we recognize them accordingly. Just wanted to give you a snapshot of our website. As you can see here, this is a lot of the information that you would need if you're a parent, a teacher, a coach requesting a bus for a field trip. It's all there. Registration, we're big on that. We're pushing more and more so that you cannot get on the bus unless you register. In the past, we've had a little bit of a struggle with that because we hadn't done it. And now it's a must. All right, transportation routing. So who qualifies to be transported? You have to reside 2 or more miles from your campus that you have been assigned. It should be the shortest route that may be traveled on public roads. So we get a lot of folks that will get on Google and say, okay, take me to XYZ school, and it'll take them. But Google will do the fastest route. And the fastest route is not always the shortest route. And so the state says it has to be the shortest distance measured from the school to the home or vice versa. Yeah, we at the beginning when Google came out and it was doing a lot of mapping, we had a lot of issues with that. Now, not so much. People understand that. And this is all on our website, by the way. Special education, I skipped over hazardous traffic areas. So if anything changes during the years, you will see that I will ask to come before you and change or add some hazardous zones. So depending on our growth, depending on traffic conditions, we can add or delete hazardous areas. So you don't have to be 2 or more miles. If you live within a hazardous area, we will transport you to school.
So Hector, what's the definition of a hazardous area?
Very good question. So it's multiple criteria. Traffic is the main one. So if there are no traffic devices at an intersection and this community has to go to this school and we have no traffic devices here, that's a hazard. And so that's one of the criteria. Most of the time, that's what it is. There is one stipulation that was recently added to TEA, and that's high risk of violence. Well, obviously, we don't have that in College Station. So if your community is considered high risk of violence, then you may qualify for hazardous traffic conditions. Does that answer your question, Mr. Martin? Thank you.
And I want to follow up on that with a question too. I was wondering when that happens and we see that list, obviously our role is to pick up the kids and drive them so they don't have to walk. Do we get the city involved at that point and let them know that, you know, these are unsafe areas potentially and see if they can do anything about it?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, we do. We work very closely with the city. If an intersection is not protected, you know, if it doesn't have traffic devices or whatever, a lot of times, such as on in front of Cypress Grove, we've got a traffic crossing guard right there. Now, traffic guards are not provided by us. Those are provided by the city. So we work very closely with the city first to see if they can help us out with anything like that when situations arise.
Do they, besides the traffic guards, have you seen them react with things like lights and so forth in some areas as well?
Yeah, recently we saw, Caleb, correct me if I'm wrong, Graham? No, Barron and Alexandria? Yeah, so Barron and Alexandria is one of those situations, Ms. McAdams, where they've installed traffic devices where there was none in the past. And so in the future, we're going to be looking at that. Does that really qualify now for a hazardous area, or does it not? But yeah, they do help us. We have a good relationship with them. We were recently working really closely with them with the project out at College Hills and that construction right there. We had about that much clearance on either side of a bus when going through Francis Street. Yeah, very tight.
And I guess the other one that you mentioned, I think a year ago when you made the presentation, was around like Greens Prairie and.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did any of the improvements, the road changes there, change our evaluation of whether that was a safety hazard or not, or is that?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, that was changed. Now, during the summer, they worked on those sidewalks off of Greens Prairie. And so that disqualified a few communities for transportation because now they have sidewalks. And so they can walk to school safely. And in the past, we were transporting certain folks that qualified and wanted the service.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Thanks.
Bullet number 2 is special education eligibility criteria. And anybody that we transport for special needs services has to be approved by the ARD committee. And that falls under the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. If those folks qualify, then we are more than glad to provide transportation services for those students. Okay, so route design. So for elementary, we have a walk zone of 0.2 miles to the bus stop. So we try to put bus stops so that they're distance accordingly so that we don't have a lot of stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. The more stops we have on a route, the longer it's going to take to get to its destination. So we do have that for elementary, it's 0.2 of a mile. For secondaries, we have 0.5 of a mile. So we figure that students that are a little older can walk a little bit more distance to get to the stop so we can get them to school. Stops are spread as far apart as criteria will allow. So it decreases the number of stops each bus will make on its route, and it also minimizes riding time for the students, like we said earlier. Capacities, pre-pandemic. School buses are rated by the manufacturer so that we can have certain seats or certain students on a bus. Typically, and College Station has adopted a maximum ridership goal of 3 per seat if they're elementary. Most buses are 71 passengers, so we should fit 71 kids on a bus if they're elementary. There's some variances. Some kids are bigger than others. We find that kids are getting bigger anyway. So we play it by ear. Also, on the secondary, it's 2 to a seat, with some exceptions where if we got 3, I want to say skinny kids, intermediate kids, then we can sit those 3 kids together. We had an instance where we used a bus that was seatbelt throughout, and we had it on a secondary run. And middle school, Caleb, I haven't told the whole story, but I think it was middle school. And the seatbelt would not go clear across the chest of that student. He was a big guy. So we looked everywhere, and we couldn't find a solution. The industry has not caught up with the need of seatbelt buses throughout, and has not caught up with the fact that kids are growing. And so we had to do some adjustments there. We did what we had to do to transport that child, but the industry is on full notice that what they have out there right now, it's not standard. It's standard, but it doesn't meet some of the needs of some of the children on the buses. For high school, we have a goal of 54. Again, this is pre-pandemic. Right now, temporary goal that we have for ourselves is 2 to a seat. And the kids love that. They love the fact that they can get their own little space. Those seats are getting shorter and shorter, just like airlines. The seats are getting tighter and tighter. For school buses, it's the same thing. We're trying to get as many kids as possible on one bus. Those buses are expensive. They're about $100,000 if you haven't priced one lately, brand new. All right, paid riders. We do have a paid rider policy in College Station ISD. What does that mean? Students are eligible to be paid riders if they live within 1 and 2 miles away from the campus. So those people, those folks that may not qualify because they're not 2 or more mile and they're not hazardous, then this is an option for them. Ever since before I got here, we have had that option with College Station ISD. No paid riders for less than 1 mile. So if they're within a mile, then they don't qualify for this program. We don't deviate more than 0.2 of a mile from the existing route if there's a request to transport a paid rider. And if there's room on the bus, then we will accommodate that paid rider. If we don't have room, then we have a tough choice to call them and say, we really don't have choice, I'm sorry, even if you're willing to pay. We don't have a lot of riders. As you can see, the sub-bullet right there, we had 9 riders last year that were paid riders. This year, we only have 1. The cost is on our website, and that's the price that we charge per month. For regular ed, $70. If you have a second child, it's $110. Third child plus, it's $140. If they're free or reduced, then they get a reduced cost of that. If they are completely free, then they get to waive the fee. Okay, so recent reports. Annual report to TEA, as you can see, our route report, that means every mile that we ran transporting children. 2017, we had 809,000 plus. 2018, we had 866,000 plus. And then this past year, we had 607,000. Again, short year due to the pandemic. The cost per mile. So that's due December 1st. And in 2016, we had regular ed. We were at $5.04 per mile. Special need was at 86 cents per mile. 2017, it was very similar, $5.51 per mile, and then 79 cents per mile on special needs. On 2018, we see a little bit of a change, $4.07 per mile, and then $3.69 for special needs. So if you're wondering, those numbers kind of look off, what we're trying to do is, in the past, a lot of the expenses were being lumped in on regular education. And so that inflated our numbers and showed like it was costing us a lot more to transport regular than it was sped. But in the years to come, we're trying to keep an eye on what is literally being spent on special need versus what is being spent by regular needs. And so that's why you see that difference there. We do have Head Starts audits that we go through, I think almost annually, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, and we have not had any major findings in the past. They want us to have seat-belted buses throughout, every bus, and that's a challenge. We cannot do that at this point. So some of the challenges. Employee recruitment. So right now we are sitting at 18% recruitment rate, turnover rate. Remember, we provide 25 plus hours a week. That is, in College Station, that is not a lot. If this is the only job you have with us as a school bus driver, few people can survive on 25 hours a week. Remember, we also have a 60-day lag. Sometimes in our pandemic, 4 months, up to 4 months, to qualify an employee to become a bus driver. We are highly visible, as you can imagine. So we don't even need an 800 number on our buses. If we do something wrong, they know who to call. Our ratio is 1 driver for 71 students. And please remind yourselves that you're driving. Yes, it's not Dallas, it's not Houston, but you're still in College Station, and certain peaks, certain days, certain hours in College Station, that's a challenge. And you've got 71 kids with your back to them that you have to mind. So that's a challenge.
But Hector, when it says 1 to 71, is that counting both routes they run in the morning, an elementary and a
No,
secondary?
that's per run, so.
Per run, okay.
Yes, sir.
All right,
So that's, because we have a maximum ridership of 71,
that's what you,
yeah. So at any point, a driver can have 71. And we only have, I don't think I said this, we only have monitors on special needs buses, and we have some on Head Start buses. Other than that, if we have a challenging route, what we call opportunity routes, sometimes we can move someone and then we can assist the driver sometimes with
I
that.
was just asking because I know we run our elementary route first to get the little ones
Yes.
taken care of, and then we run for our secondary schools.
Yes.
Same in the afternoon.
Right.
Correct?
That is correct. Some buses, we run everybody together, depending on the distances. Most of them are like what you said. So we pick up the elementary kids first, drop them off, and then pick up the secondary kids and drop them off. Same in the afternoon, vice versa. So student accountability, electronics accountability and employee recollection, that's different. We're talking about how do we keep track? And that's a word that we don't use in our field, by the way. We don't say student tracking. We find that some parents don't like that word. So we use the word accountability. So basically, it's the same thing. So we are working with a vendor to help us do student accountability. The pandemic had another hit to our schedule and our demands for that. So we are waiting on hardware that is coming, can you imagine, from China. As soon as it gets here, as a matter of fact, it should get here this week. Some of it will get here and will be installed. We hope to be fully operational by the end of the year so that every child coming in on a bus can do a proximity card to a sensor, and they will track Hector's on the bus and he boarded at X amount date and time. And when I get off, there again, it'll say when I got off, where I got off. And if you're at the wrong stop, it'll red flag the driver and tell him, hey, Hector doesn't get off here. So we're really excited about that. It's got some other features that's going to be wonderful for us. Navigation is also going to be. Right now, if you drive a school bus and you're a sub like Caleb and I are, when there's a need, then we got the route on one hand and driving with the other, and then looking at the kids like this. And sometimes, believe it or not, we get calls and like, hey, your driver was reading a magazine when he was driving. No, it was actually the route. So now, in the future, once this hardware is installed, we'll have kind of like your GPS that you use normally when you go to Houston for appointments or whatever. You just plug in there, and it'll tell you which way to go, where to stop. It'll be wonderful. Do you have questions, Mr. Martin?
Well, the piece you mentioned earlier, because prior to the student, or because we haven't implemented yet, but the student accountability piece, for example, first of the school year is always very interesting because the drivers are getting to know the kids and which kids are going to ride their bus and where they get off. And in particular with, the little ones, you can have a little one get off the wrong place, or a kiddo gets off. This happens with the older ones. They get off the right location, but they don't go home.
Yeah.
They go to a friend's and hang out, but they don't let mom or dad know. So we receive a call at 5:30, little Mikey Martin dad hang out at home because I'm over at a buddy's, but I didn't let my parents know. So right now, it's you call the bus driver. Was he on the bus or not? You pull the camera system up, those types of things. This particular thing he's speaking of will allow us to access that information very quickly from an electronic standpoint.
Yep, and remotely at that. So Caleb can be at home, he gets the call, I get the call, and we can log onto the system and we can say who got off where. It'll be great. Big challenge, like Mr. Martinell says at the beginning of the year with the little ones. I lose some sleep at night at the beginning of the school year, guys. I've had calls up to 9 o'clock, not in this district, by the way. 9 o'clock at night.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
I know we had that problem when my oldest started 5th grade, the first time to ride the bus. First day of school, she got on the wrong bus to come home. An hour later, she's not home. Mom's panicking.
Yeah.
But you guys worked it out. You found her, and then you brought her straight to the house.
We
But I can
take,
see how this system would be very, very helpful.
Yes.
So you guys are not on walkies trying to figure it all out. Or CBs trying to figure it all out.
yeah, we take that very seriously.
And just to
Yeah.
clarify, would it be a actual card that each student would have? So,
Yes, ma'am. We're working. We're trying to set up a pilot school, which will be River Bend, by the way. To start that off, the cards will be able to have a picture if we wanted to, so we can actually print on the cards, the RFID cards. So yeah, the child will come and place it or near the reader, and then it'll upload it to the system and tell us that that child was there or got off. We looked at a biometric system, and those were not as reliable as we wanted them, so that's why we went with the card system. All right. So, meeting all TEA, DPS, DOL, TCEQ, any acronym you can come up with, we are trying to meet with it. So, TEA, we do the routes, the cost reports, any of the guidelines for eligibility, we work with them. Department of Public Safety, the driver qualifications also and eligibility. Labor law requirements with DOL, obviously. And then any materials that we deal with, fuel, oil, all of that, we deal with TCEQ also when we have to. We don't like to deal with them very often. We haven't in the past. We've had some spills, some minor spills when we get deliveries of fuel. And depending on how much fuel is spilled, then we have to contact them or they have to contact them to mitigate that. All right. Performance metrics. So, what measures do we use in transportation to determine how well we're doing? We have developed the metrics. We determine the performance and the targets of those metrics. We want to hear from you. Are these metrics good? Are they correct? Do we need to expand on something? Do we need to scale back on something else? Performance targets are also something that we always keep in mind. And then the annual reports that we submit to TEA. Here's some of the metrics that I'm going to go over real quick. So the transportation metrics, at-fault accidents. I'm really, really proud of this too. So the standard for our industry is 1 accident every 100,000 miles. As you can see in 17-18, we had no accidents. And if you recall, it was in the 800,000 mile range that we were that year. 2018-19, no accidents. 19-20, we had 1. Now, these are accidents, obviously, that are at fault. Do you see us in the news when they hit us? Yes, and that happens quite a bit. And the first thing people say is, I didn't see it. And a lot of times we have the lights on, but the stop sign out, the whole 9 yards. And that's the first thing we hear is like, I don't know where it came from. We were sitting right there.
so obviously that's impressive safety numbers. Can you just clarify what the difference in between an accident and an incident? Is it what you're kind of saying?
Yes.
Is that an
so
example
if we're at fault, if it was preventable, then it's an incident, right? The whole industry is getting away from the word accident because most every accident really is preventable. So we're moving from accident to the word motor vehicle crash or motor vehicle incident because most of it is preventable. So incidents in the yard, for example, Ms. McAdams, somebody forgets to set their parking brake and the bus rolls into the other bus. That's an incident. There was no kids on the bus, nobody was injured. It was a little bit of damage, maybe a mirror broken, we replace it and move on.
Okay.
So productivity, bus capacities, regular education. Again, we said that we wanted to be at 71 for elementary. The goal for intermediate in a perfect world is 60, and for high school it's 54. I know everybody would like to keep that goal that we have currently of 48, 2 to a seat. It's so wonderful. The drivers love it too. But that would entail having a lot more buses. If everything went back to normal right now, and we kept the 48 per bus, we would need a whole slew of buses. The goal, again, is 90% capacity or full average. Right now, pre-pandemic, it's 55.8 average daily riders. The performance is average daily ridership at 60. We have a maximum ridership right now of 77. And you say, wait a minute, I thought you said it was 71 capacity. Remember the transit buses that we talked earlier? Those are 84 passengers. And so we can have up to 84 passengers on a school bus, depending on the school that they board. That's why the 77 there. Student discipline. The number of referrals written per total miles driven. The goal is to be at 1 for every 500 miles driven. And that's a lofty goal, by the way. Can you imagine taking a 500-mile trip with your kids and there were no incidents during that 500 miles? The performance is 2018-19, we had 536 incidents. That ended up to be 1 for every 1,654 miles. So that's a pretty good record. In 1920, we had 917, which is 1 for every 607 miles driven. So still met our goal. And then year to date, we have 125 incidents of student discipline.
It's not a fair question. Do you happen to know about how many miles we've traveled this far this year? How we're tracking with the 125 relative to the over 500 miles? It's not a fair, I'm sorry.
I'm working on that report right now, Mr. Mondale, because we've got to submit it to TEA, so I don't have those numbers, but no, I don't.
125, I would assume at this point in time is a good place to be,
Yes.
probably.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And just looking back at the 2 previous years, any explanation why such a huge jump between 18-19 and 19-20? And I'll just even preface that this is a metric that we always question, because at least I do, is that it's an easy, it's possible one you could do really well at just by saying I'm not going to report anybody. But I mean, I think if we need to report somebody, it needs to, we need to report them. So I mean, hopefully we're being consistent from year to year. It's just so.
Well, and if you remember, that's the year where we had a shortened year. So that's, as of March, we had no more incidents of last year. So the 1920, the 917 is, well, I'm sorry, that's not right. The miles driven is what got us there. And there was an uptick. We're not sure what happened. Sometimes what happens in McAdams is we have certain buses that give us a little bit more challenge than others. And sometimes the driver feels like, okay, I've got to ride up everybody on the bus. Well, again, like you said, we don't say, oh, no, don't do that. You've ridden up, half of the bus, we're going to have to deal with it. Was it legit? Well, between us and the administrator of the campus, we figure that out.
Okay, yeah, it is one of those that it's very hard to have consistency from driver to driver on, what they think a write-up should, a referral is warranted, when a referral is warranted. So, okay, it's interesting.
Usually newer drivers tend to ride people up more. More seasoned drivers don't, because they can deal with the kids, and a lot of them. I have one driver that has been on the same route for 14 years, and it's a challenging route, but he wants that route because he can deal with the kids. He's dedicated to those kids, and he's not a high rider. He doesn't ride them up all the time. He knows most of the parents. And so he'll get on the phone and say, hey, can you help me with Hector? He's not behaving. So, yeah, it really depends on the driver.
And like you said, just like you said earlier, training the bus drivers to deal with the behavior was one of your biggest challenges. So I'm assuming training is a piece of how you continue to address that.
Yes, ma'am. And the metrics also help us. So we track, like you see, we track every incident that happens. So we put it on a spreadsheet, and then we can sort that spreadsheet, and then now we know who's got the most incidents, written up incidents so far, according to what time of the year we're at. And so that helps us flag, okay, what do I need to do to help Caleb drive that bus and be more efficient? Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess you could, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I guess you could also have kids that are repeat offenders.
Yes.
I mean, and I don't know if you're going to get to this, but like, what do you do in those situations with a child that's a repeat offender?
So we work very closely with the campus. And so the campus is the one that really is in charge of the discipline. But the drivers take a stake in it, and we take a stake in it also. So many times we'll meet with the parent, we'll ask them to come in, or I've done home visits. And I'll go out and I'll say, what can we do? How can we help you? What is going on here? So yes, it really depends on whether it's a repeat offender. And if it is, usually there's some underlying reason why they're repeat offenders. Are the parents not being helpful, or do they not know? We've had instances where they're like, I didn't know. How can I address it if I don't know? Okay, well, then maybe we did something that we didn't communicate well with the parent. So we do follow up on those. Yes, ma'am.
I actually have a question. Has there any correlation with the time on the bus versus the referrals? So are you seeing any kind of correlation with that?
No, not at all. Caleb, correct me if I'm wrong. Not at all.
Okay.
So longer ride times doesn't necessarily mean more write-ups.
Okay.
Interesting question, though.
What was, if there is any, and I don't know if that data is pertinent, but what was the turnover from 1819 to 1920?
As far as bus drivers, yes?
Yes, sir.
I do think I have that information a little further.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're trying to qualify all this, and I mean, kids are going to be kids, and perception is what it is, and the drivers are dealt a heavy task on it. So, I mean, I don't know if we need to dive too deep into it. It's just part of the process. It's part of kids growing up.
Yeah.
But I was just curious, just the turnover there. There's a whole lot of metrics that could be playing into this.
That's a good point. One of the things that we find in our industry is that the turnover, the new driver, because we have a bidding system, so if a route becomes vacant, if you have certain seniority, you can sign up for that route. The highest seniority person gets that route. That's typical across the nation. What does that do, though? The most challenging routes are the ones that are mostly vacant. What happens to the new guy? Usually he gets the most challenging route. So it's kind of two things that would, yeah.
And looking forward, I think Hector will show you the turnover rate. I don't think that data is going to show you a connection to this. I don't think. I was glancing forward a little bit.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some. So here's our retention turnover. So the goal is 25%. 18-19, we have 24%. 19-20, that would have been last year, 26%. And then right now we're at 18%. And that's year to date. So we've got a while to go still. One of the factors, or several factors, is it's a transient population, the drivers. So, and also many people use our department, our position, the driver position as a stepping stone. It's not unheard of that we will train somebody, we will get them ready with their CDL, and then for whatever reason, they're gone in a month. The record is one day. I had one person come in and say, I can't deal with this. It's too stressful. And I mean, that's an outlier, okay? That doesn't happen all the time. But yeah, I had one person say, I thought I could do this, I can't, and they were gone. So yeah, or other people that, remember, we offer 25 plus hours a week. You have a CDL now. You can drive a dump truck with a CDL Class B. You can drive a cement truck with a Class B CDL. So 25 hours at this rate versus 8 hours plus at this other rate, you can't fault people for moving on. Customer service. So incidents, complaints, concerns handled by our department. The goal is to have less than 50. As you can see, 2017 was not a good year for that goal. We had 268. For 2018, we did make improvements, and so we had 124 complaints. And then 2019, we had 67. Remember, it's a short year also. And then year to date, right now, we have 10. And that can be range the gamut. Again, it can be somebody reports a driver that didn't make a stop correctly or didn't open the door and let the kids off at the right stop. I mean, it could be any performance, or it could be just, perception also. So we track all of that.
What do you attribute the big drop from 2017 to 2018?
There again,
Just an
I
anomaly
think,
or
referrals.
something you implement?
well, we've done more and more training
Yeah.
in-house, and I think very highly that that's what happened. So we have hired some part-time personnel to help with the management of the department during those years, and so that helped tremendously also.
And just a thought on this one particularly, that this might be one that you might think of normalizing per ridership or per miles, right? Because at some point, as you grow the riders and grow the miles,
Yeah. It's going to go up.
maybe you could have a few more incidents. Although I love keeping it low. So good job.
Okay, so implication for transportation, area that we need to address, efficiencies. That's always on the back of our head. That's always in the back, and it's also in the front of our heads. So we're always trying to maximize ridership, adjust routes based on what? On ridership. If we have low ridership on one bus and low ridership on another bus, can we combine that route to make it one? And so we don't have to run two buses, but only one. We have done that somewhat this year based on ridership numbers. We're always looking at that. GPS riding times also. So if a bus is taking more than an hour, we need to do something, and we do, so that it's not longer than an hour. And then also the feedback from the parents, from the administrators as well. And then discipline. So we monitor the trends by the campus, by the route, by the employee, because if the employee is moving from one route to another and we see an uptick, it's like, oh, what's happening here? What do we need to do to help? Training drivers and monitors, we do that continuously. The accidents. So the goal is 0. We want to have 0 accidents. Right now, we do have 0. We want to continue to focus on prevention. Yeah, knock on wood. And then follow up on the training. So training for us, I think, is the key thing to do better each year.
So I think, so we do this every 3 years. So I assume when we do this again in 3 years, there'll be an asterisk next to this year, because probably the efficiency piece of things is going to be all out of whack.
Yeah.
I would
that is
assume.
correct.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct. We will put that asterisk right now.
Right. Go ahead and put it in.
So monitoring and reporting. So the administration, the director for transportation and his staff, my staff, review the metrics every month and as needed, so that we are keeping our thumb on the pulse, so to speak, or our finger on the pulse. We make recommendations based on input from all stakeholders, the campus, the parents, the administrators, and then also from you also. Full management oversight workshop, like we said, Mr. Martinell just said, every 3 to 4 years. and then the annual updates that we do on the metrics. So every year, even though we don't present to you every year, I do share the metrics with Ms. Amy and also with Mr. Martindale to see if we need to improve on something.
Yeah, because those other oversight areas, you will see a different department, whether it's under the business piece from Ms. Strauss or from Ms. Perry under administrative services. They'll share you just a metrics update, the ones that are not reporting that year. And I'm trying to remember, Amy, those kind of flowed through last month, probably, I think. I'm trying to remember.
Yes, I don't know if it's on or not. We did, actually, transportations was, I think in September, or August or September, and we have a schedule that theirs
Okay.
was reported.
All right. I did not know it was going to go to an hour and a half, but here we are. Is there anything else that you have for me? Any questions or suggestions that I want to?
Going back, oh, good. Going back to one of the first slides where you're talking about the ages of the fleet, I think it was around 25% or so right now, or less than 10 years old, but within the next 4 years, it'd be over 80%. What's the goal there as far as, the average age for school buses and?
So the industry standard is 12 years. Okay, anything over 12 years, usually you're going to have a lot of miles on it, a lot of deterioration on it. You're going to spend a lot of money repairing that vehicle. That doesn't mean you can't run them 15 years. So most of our buses are rated at 15 years. The transit buses are rated at 20 years. But we see deterioration starting in the 12 to 14 year range. The goal would be to replace them, obviously. But we do have the means, the support to maintain those vehicles if we need to, as long as we need to.
Hector, will you scroll back? And Mr. Ben's right, that was early on. Do you mind trying to find that one just so we can kind of see the numbers? Because the way you reported it struck me, because we were good and then all of a sudden we were not good anymore. And that has to do with buying big chunks with bond funds. And back in 2011 was a bad school finances went real bad. So I know why it kind of came out of the replacement cycle pulled out of the regular operating budget. Because like Hector mentioned, one bus is $100,000. So if you're buying, 3, 4, 5 buses a year, you're looking at $500,000 out of your regular operating budget. But that's why there's such a quick in 23, 24, where you go from 50% to 80 all at once, is because of the big purchases out of bond. Not that that's a bad thing. That's just why you see it shift like that. So within the next few years, this is something we need to be very cognizant of.
So to follow up on that, Mr. Martindale, if we bought all of our buses since 2011 with bond funds, is that true, or have we had some
No.
others?
No, we did have some other purchases, and you can see on the table here, we have a few purchases after that. So the last big purchase was in 2017. That was with bond. We have purchased some other buses. Excuse me. Also through the help, I need to recognize this, through the help of the special needs department. So all the 3 buses after that, actually special needs bottom for us.
Yes, a vast majority have been bought with bonds since 15. There's been a few here and there, but nothing of significance.
Is there we always want to be better than average, but is there an average as far as among school districts in Texas, that the number of buses over 10 years old versus less than 10 years old, or?
I would say it's probably about 50%. So 50% of the districts in Texas have 50% of their fleet more than 12 years old. So we're sitting at a good point right now because we're in the 10, 12. We see a decline after 12 years on the, again, the cost, the fuel economy also on those buses.
This is the one I makes sense to me. So if we look at 23, 24 becomes a problem year. In essence, I think I just heard him say standard is 50% mark. So next year is 21, 22. We really need to, a minimum of 6-month turnaround. It's probably conservative on the purchase of a bus, so a year. So that will be a conversation that probably needs to be addressed at some point in time next year so that we're preparing or either ordering something through the course of next year or at the latest the following year so that we don't find ourselves in 23, 24. So within the next 1 to 2 years, it's going to be something that has to be addressed on a sizable level. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
So the goal is not necessarily, I mean, the goal is to be at that 50% number and not to use that based on possible what our enrollment might be in those years. Or is that all whatever?
But I don't know enrollment on, this is the age of our fleet. So enrollment would increase the number of routes that are needed.
Okay.
So I guess if the increased number of routes,
Not necessarily how many buses.
right, would influence how many buses we need to have.
Okay,
I kind of see it independent of the age of our route,
okay.
Mr. Horak. And I don't, you know, here's the thing, it's going to take a year or two for enrollment and projections to reset to be able to attempt to project something like that, in my opinion. Demographers will come December and show us, you know, their latest numbers, which I visited with Mr. Templeton a week or two ago, but you know, it'll be a challenge for them too, because everything is well, we're at that time now where you can't really project anything.
That's a good point. But on the age of the buses, I just kind of following up along the thought process that, do you all ever talk in mileage on a bus though? Because that's kind of maybe how we sometimes talk about our own vehicles. And I was curious, you know, do you know how College Station compares on how much mileage we put on an average bus compared to maybe the state?
So typically we have less mileage than the bigger cities and districts, because what we try to do, Ms. McAdams, also is rotate buses so that if a route bus is a route bus this year, maybe we need to put it on the field trip pool next year, so that we rotate those buses so that we don't have a lopsided, oh, our field trip buses are 200,000 and then our route buses are only at 75,000, so that we have a good average overall, the whole fleet. So yes, we do look at mileage also.
Makes sense. I have a question on kind of another topic, and it's really about how we're funded for ridership, right? We do get some funding for ridership, and so I was just wondering, and I think you mentioned in that September note that it had changed so I was just curious on how the state funds for ridership.
So in the past, Ms. McAdams, since we're Chapter 41, we were not funded by the report that we turn into TEA. We would get a lump sum for transportation. What the legislature did in the past past year, Ms. Amy,
House Bill
is
3.
it funded us at $1 a mile. So regardless of what it's costing us, it's funding us, all districts, all transportation, at $1 a mile. That had a positive impact actually on us, because we were being funded below $1 a mile.
It did not. Please note that we've talked about hold harmless this whole year about, you know, they set us a target ADA. Transportation is one that is not included in that hold harmless. So for 1920, we had less miles, of course, and so, you know, did some things with ADA, so we were only funded for that partial year on miles. And this year, less miles again because of the pandemic, and we're transporting less. So it will only be actual miles. So, you saw those numbers in this slide. That is going to affect our revenue.
And just to clarify, it's actual mileage we drive, or is it a mileage per, I mean, how is it actually
I think it's just
calculated?
route miles.
Route
Special
miles.
trip miles don't count in there, but it's route miles.
Route miles, no matter how many kids are on there?
That's correct. In the past, there was a formula for that. You had to have, the more efficient you were, the higher the funding rate.
Right.
Since they went to $1, it doesn't matter. You still want to be efficient.
Yeah. Before it was based on what they call linear density.
Right.
And now, and they've taken that away. So it's only on miles.
Honestly, it seems like it would be encouraging you not to be efficient, but,
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're not going there.
No.
But, I mean,
As a matter of fact, Ms. McKenzie, we, in our spreadsheets for every route, we still look at the linear density because that's a good indication of whether we're being good stewards or not, if that route is efficient or not. And if it's not, what are we doing to fix it?
Well, and $1 a mile is not coming near what it cost us. And so, if we're trying to just rack up the miles for the funding, we're going in the hole. So.
makes sense. Thank y'all for explaining that. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions from anyone?
Can I make just one last comment? I think you'll have a wonderful operation. Again, something our district can be proud of. So, and thank you for sharing everything with us. And one of the things, I mean, I just have always had great communication interactions with your drivers. Just really have. And the few times that I've had to go out to the transportation office, I've also noticed it seems like a wonderful atmosphere to work. Those people are just happy to be there and a lot of camaraderie. So it just seems like a great organization. So thank you for keeping it that way, both of you and all your team.
And Kimberly, I want to mention this because Hector and Caleb, they're not going to brag on themselves. We're fortunate to have both of them. I'll tell you right now. And he referenced, the rate of pay for our drivers, and we're in a very competitive market for that with the university and other neighboring districts and those types of things. And while he has a turnover rate, what mitigates that and folks being a part of his department for a little bit less has to do with the environment that he and Caleb established out there. People would prefer that environment for maybe a little less rate pay because they feel valued. So kudos to each of them for that. And also, and I don't know I know you gentlemen were last year, I don't know about this year, but both of you serve as executive officers for your respective professional state organizations. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir. Yes.
I'm sorry. That's your cue to tell us what that is.
I have served as area director for the area in Texas that we live in, and I am currently the treasurer for the Texas Association for Pupil Transportation. And Caleb is the historian, am I right? For TAPT, Texas Association of Pupil Transportation also. We also serve, by the way, in the regional local chapter, and that's the Gulf Coast. And we're both members and officers of that also as well.
So I think we are very fortunate as a district to have such an involved, conscientious transportation department that really cares about the community, the students, those that work for you. And just want to echo again everything that Ms. McAdams said and Mr. Martindale. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great report. Always interesting. Always interesting.
And Caleb will tell you, and myself, we love being at College Station ISD. We're not just saying that because we're in front of you, but we do. I will say that Mr. Martin said we don't brag. I'm going to brag a little bit. Mr. Caleb and I have been offered positions elsewhere, and we said no. We like where we're at.
Good. Keep doing that. Thank you. Is there anything else? Okay, then we're adjourned at 12:44.